So he meets a second princess, who's also very lovely and very charming and very nice, and she's making him tea, and they're having a conversation about his Doctor Who fanfiction and the video games that he likes to play. But she notices that while she's making tea, he's looking most lustfully at her ass. And she's now worried that he's going to ask her to marry him. And she says, God, I don't want to say yes. So how can I get out of this? He starts stumbling over his question again. Do you think maybe we could possibly get married? And by the time he's done, she stuffed pillows from the couch into her dress and turns around and says, probably. And the prince, before anything else can happen, says, Mom, let's go. And his mom says, what's wrong? And he yells, Mama said no fat chicks. And she says, okay, I'll meet you in the car, honey. So they get in the car and they drive away and they meet a third princess. And now he and she are having a conversation about his other fan fiction that he writes and video games that he likes to play. And this princess is actually very interested in both of these things. But she still doesn't want to marry him for a plethora of other reasons. 1, he's self-absorbed. 2, he's kind of rotund. 3, he smells terrible. So she says, how can I get out of this? And she notices that he has a Super Mario tattoo on his wrist. She says, is that a tattoo of Super Mario? God, could you be a faker nerd right now? That is so mainstream. And before he can even ask her if she'll marry him, he says, Mom! And she says, what's wrong, honey? And she says, this one's being a bitch! So the mom says, okay, we can go home. I'll meet you in the car. And off they go, and they go home. And nothing happens for a while. And the prince is sitting in his basement playing Mario, and he hears a knock on the door. I can't make a knock. There we go. And he goes, Mom! Door! He doesn't get a response. So he hears another knock. This time louder. Mom! Door! No response, but another knock. So he gets up and says, fine, I'll answer the door. What do you want? It's a comely young woman standing in the rain. She says, do you think I could come out of the storm for a little while? It's always raining in England, by the way. It's terrible. Don't go. He said, are you a princess? She says, yes. I'm totally a princess. So he says, fine, you can come in. Mom! Company! And he goes back downstairs to continue playing video games. God, I probably died while I was doing that. The mom, who's now come downstairs and sees this lovely young woman in the kitchen, says, man, maybe if I'm nice enough to her, I can convince her to marry my son. So she gives her brand new clothes and makes up the guest room. And she stacks 20 mattresses on top of each other with 20 down comforters. How she does this, I have no idea. It's a gigantic room, apparently. And she has superhuman strength. Also, I don't see why it's necessary. She can't sleep on all 20 of them at once. Regardless, this is what happens. So the princess, who's not really a princess, spends the night on these 20 down mattresses and 20 down comforters. And in the morning, she's thinking to herself, man, how am I going to get out of marrying this guy? He's terrible. She says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to lie and pretend as though there was something on one of those mattresses that made it so I couldn't sleep. And I'll be so fragile and just weak that he won't love me. So the mom says, how'd you sleep? And she says, oh, God, it was terrible. I couldn't sleep at all. There was some kind of lump in those mattresses. And the son says, finally, a real princess. So he stumbles over his marriage question again. Do you think maybe, I don't know, that you'd want to possibly get married to me? And the princess, who's not a princess, doesn't want to say yes, but she looks around the house and sees how nice it is and remembers how comfortable it was to sleep on all 20 of those mattresses in that gigantic room and says, you know what, maybe I can get something out of this. So she says, of course I'd love to marry you. And they get married and live happily ever after for almost 3.5 years before they get divorced. And she gets a brand new castle and 10 down mattresses and 10 comforters, but still quite an improvement for a not-so-princess who was stuck in the rain by herself. And that is the kind of sort of maybe, but probably not at all, true story of The Princess and the Pea. That's it.